then I now start officially. My name is Maria Wagner, and I'm the Managing Director of the Sustainable Games Alliance. Our goal is to help games companies to reduce emissions and, in general, be more sustainable and make better and sustainable games. And today we welcome you to another Sustainable Communications Network meetup because, of course, aside from emission reduction, it is important how you talk about like what you're doing and that we as an industry establish a way of talking about yeah um, the impact which we're having on the environment, but also like if we do something positive, how we talk about it in a safe and impactful way, which on the one hand reaches the players, but also clearly communicates what is what are we achieving, what are we doing. We have this kind of meetups every quarter, and Celia, who's also with us today, was one of the founders of this network. Maybe Celia, do you want to say like just shortly from your point of view, what is the goal of this network?
Sure thing. Thanks, Maria. My name is Celia. I'm from Cybo, and I'm the head of player experience there. I've been at Cybo for 7 years. Or for those 7 years, I've had the pleasure of also working across our socials with our community, player support included. So comms has become increasingly relevant as we've been working around sustainability, not only as a company value, but also making it a larger and larger part of our Subway Surfers roadmap, having multiple beats around the year, big campaigns, smaller one-time things that celebrate days that tie into the theme. And so we've had a lot of experience in this, but I've also discovered that I think it's through conversations across different studios where I've learned the most in terms of how to better our comms or how to change them or what might be or might not be relevant to our players. And that there's also not like one size fits all because all of our products are so different and so are our audiences. So just figuring out together how to approach this, I think, and then sparring and sharing as we do that. A lot of us are mobile games, so we get to try and um, not only do not only do we do what we do once a year, but we do repeats. So there's plenty of opportunities to iterate and change and just better things. And then as these different directives come in, also pivot and or better or prepare for them in this case too, and then help each other do that. So it's a really nice community, and there's some really great people that I've been able to connect with here and studios for that matter.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Every meetup has like basically different topics. We have also reoccurring topics. Especially Celia was driving the work on a roadmap for in-game events. So yeah, please reach out if you want to know more about this. Reach out to us or Celia. And basically today we want to talk about this upcoming directive, just to better understand how to prepare and maybe also just talk about it, how we understand this directive. And for that, I would like Ben to just give us an overview and would hand over to Ben now. Thank you.
Um, Thanks, Maria. And thank you, Celia, as well for being here. Um, I'm going to keep it nice and brief because I think what we want to spend most of our time doing actually is talking about like what we do proactively in response to this new piece of legislation, this particular directive that's being transposed at the moment into European member state law. Um, So to start that process, I'm just going to give you an overview of what the Empowering Consumers for the Green Transition directive is, how it changes the things that are considered unfair commercial practices. So all of this is in the context of commercial practice. So if you are making a game, if you're selling a game, we presume that these regulations will apply because, yeah, it is a commercial practice. Exactly where the lines are drawn, I think, is still to be decided. But basically, I'll give you the short overview, and then we'll talk about like what this might mean for our studios, for our games, for our green activations, things like that. And we'll stop the recording actually, so we can have a full and frank conversation about those options. So, getting into it, the ECGT, I'm just going to call it that, otherwise it's a full mouthful, became European law in February 2024, with the deadline for member states transposing it into their own national legislations back in March this year. As usual, there's always a bit of a delay with that. You can see on the EU website, most countries have started to transpose it. But the key date is September 27th. That's when enforcement is meant to begin. And the goal of the ECGT really is on preventing a few things, which I think hopefully we can all agree are negatives that really should be designed out anyway. So the first is preventing early or planned obsolescence. This is a little bit more aimed at manufacturers and hardware developers. That's, I think, where it will mostly be relevant in the games industry. There's a very small possibility that just something to consider when we're making game updates. It also focuses, and this is, I think, the key thing that we're going to spend most of the time on, misleading environmental claims, which get called greenwashing. And there's a lot in there that counts as that. It's also aiming to prevent misleading descriptions of the social characteristics of products or businesses. This is to do with things like the labor practices in your supply chain, whether you pay a living wage. Again, a little bit more relevant to manufacturers, garment producers, fashion, that kind of stuff. And the last one is it aims to prevent non-transparent, non-credible sustainability labels. And together, this is all really meant to produce a level playing field for the genuine sustainability leaders, the people that are out there doing the work and can genuinely claim to be doing that and to be in the lead in this position. Because at the moment, or prior to this, yeah, we've seen lots and lots of dodgy green claims, or weak, vague claims. And you can you can find a link to the plain language summary on the EU website that just sort of tries to give you the details in a comprehensible way, or you can read the full legal directive, get into the nitty-gritty of it there, and you can have a look at the slides later. So first thing, first consequence for the games industry, I think, is this potential digital obsolescence. So the ECGT prohibits, and this is a quote from the legislation, withholding information from consumers, or from the directive, I should say, prohibits withholding information from consumers about the fact that a software update will negatively impact the functioning of goods with digital elements or the use of digital content or digital services. That's a bit of a mouthful, but I think what it boils down to, for us anyway, the sort of practical thing is that we need to share information, the expected impacts from game updates. Most game updates are probably not going to be relevant to this, but if you are moving from hardware generation to hardware generation or obsoleting a particular software platform with an update, I think this needs to now be disclosed. Yeah, I think it's fairly straightforward, and probably something we're already doing anyway. But again, it's codifying best practices in law. It also requires that for digital services, consumers should be informed about the period during which free software updates are available. Again, I think this is more to do with, say, you buy a new car and you don't know how long it's going to kind of keep getting supported. Maybe the codec or the entertainment system becomes obsolete, doesn't get updates. I think it's more for those sorts of things, but it could capture games. So again, communicating expectations about support and timeframes. Again, this is just best practice. We're already, I think, doing this, but it does mean that it's an extra thing to kind of think about and check off. But the main thing is the greenwashing. Greenwashing is now banned, and it prohibits, in all circumstances, generic green claims, sustainability labels with no certification behind them, so no verification, no checking programs, no authority, public backing, anything like that. And we'll get into the details of this in a minute. And it prohibits claims of neutral or reduced harms based on offsetting or carbon credits. And again, remember, this is about this is a consumer product that it's changing rules to the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. So we're talking about what are commercial practices. It's not about your operational actions or communications about what you're doing as a business. It's about how you communicate about your products, about your games. So these are in addition to all the existing unfair commercial practices. Hopefully we're already avoiding all of those. So let's dig into the three of those 3 points in a bit more detail. So the first one is generic green claims. And I think this is where these reforms are long overdue. But the EU has a very particular definition of what it considers a generic green claim. So these are green claims that create an impression of excellent environmental performance when recognized environmental performance cannot be demonstrated. Okay, so it's not saying you can't claim to be doing better. It means you can't be claiming to be doing better if you can't demonstrate it, right? And it's any kind of environmental performance, whether that's lower carbon emissions, lower environmental resource use, lower water consumption, whatever it is. It needs to be demonstrated. That's the new benchmark. You can also create an impression of excellent environmental performance through like sort of implicit claims, but also through imagery and associations. So a claim can be made, or a claim made in written or oral form, combined with implicit claims such as color or images, could constitute a generic environmental claim. So here's my example. Let's say we have a really great environmental game jam or environmental themed game jam, uses lots of green colors, green nature imagery, and yeah, the way that it gets talked about, and your commercial game decides to participate in it, that could be considered to be creating an impression of excellent environmental performance. Can you demonstrate that? It really depends. So here's how my advice, I think, my advice on how to avoid green claims is to make only clear and specific claims. So try wherever you can to avoid the sort of idea, the generic thing, right? So quantifiable, specific, clear claims are on a much stronger footing when it comes to the unfair commercial practices. So whenever the specification of the environmental claim is provided in clear and prominent terms on the same medium, such as the advertising spot, the product's packaging, on the web store, the environmental claim is not considered to be a generic environmental claim. So for instance, and this is their example, climate-friendly packaging, saying that you have climate-friendly packaging would be a generic claim. And they're basically saying, okay, you got to be more specific than that. Claiming that 100% of the energy used to produce the packaging comes from renewable sources, that's specific. It's not prohibited, not at all. In fact, go ahead and go nuts. Yeah. Patrick, was that a question or? Sorry.
Even if it's not true?
Oh, I mean, obviously you need evidence too, but yeah, I think yeah,
Okay,
that's a
it's a
really good
specific. Okay, no, yeah, thank you. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's claiming you can be misleading by lying. That's I think that's already covered in other parts of unfair commercial practices. Um, yeah, it's just specifically about like kind of green claims. So don't claim or imply a game is green based on any only part of the game or based, I think, on donations to a particular cause. Or be very, very clear and specific about what you mean by what is green or what is participating in that. Um, avoid claiming sustainability, just, sustainability in general, saying, oh, we're sustainable or this game is more sustainable based on partial or incomplete information or accounting of the sustainable impacts. I think if you wanted to claim those things, I think you would need some very strong evidence, like a life cycle analysis. Instead, what we can do is we can make full transparent accounts of our production emissions. So we can say things like, okay, the production of this game over this time frame, these particular locations, emitted certain amount of CO2 equivalent over that duration. We can still say those things. And on its own, that might not make a whole lot of sense. Like, this is why we might want something else. We might need another structure in place to kind of help guide players to know, okay, is that a lot? Is that a little? Some kind of benchmarks. This is, I think, where as a collective industry we could do something in that space. You can say things like purchase renewable electricity. Sorry, you can purchase renewable electricity and specify how much and what percentage of your usage that covers. So like the previous slides example, our studio purchased 654 kilowatt hours of renewable electricity covering 85% of our office use. You can still say that, and that's still a fantastic thing to claim or to state, to share. And you can also be transparent, I think, about the purpose of green activations and where the proceeds are going. I don't think it's prohibiting you participating in them, but I think it does require us to be very clear about, say, where the proceeds are going from, this initiative, and the activation or the work that we're doing only covers this season or this particular part of the game, this feature or something. So the SGA standard aims to provide developers with very, very clear, very reliable methods that we can use to quantify the climate impacts. This is just the starting point for sustainability. In the longer term, if people want it, if there's support within the SGA members, maybe we can look at water use or other environmental indicators as well. But that's kind of the starting point. I think the baseline is looking at quantities of emissions of greenhouse gases over a particular period of time and then making that legible to players somehow. So that's the first one, green claims, generic ones. Make your generic claims specific claims instead. They've all got to be a lot more specific. The second EU determined greenwashing activity is sustainability labels with no certification, no public authority behind them. I won't read you this whole thing, but basically, you can use a sustainability label that uses the ISO 14024 standard for establishing procedures around the certification of environmental labels. Or if EU legislation produces frameworks like the Energy Efficiency Directive, which again, much more relevant to manufactured hardware than software. There isn't an energy efficiency standard in the EU for software, which is a shame, but maybe it won't be that way forever. And if there is, then yeah, maybe we can use it. So for any label, if you're thinking about a sustainability label, someone tries to sell you one certification, check that it's compliant with ISO 14024. If it is, great, you can use it. Probably costs a lot of money because there is a lot of infrastructure behind that, a lot of certification process. If it's not, just don't be involved with it. Avoid it. And maybe one day we'll get an energy label, ideally based on the SGA standard. If that's something that you think there's value in, please get involved with the SGA and help us to make it happen. Let us know that that's something that will be real value to you, and yeah, we can potentially work towards that. So that's the second one, and then the last one is carbon neutral or carbon negative statements based on use of offsets. So the EU views this as misleading. Offsets, they do get a bit of a bad rap, and I think there is still a lot of widespread misunderstanding about them. What is now misleading about this practice is if you produce a product, let's say you produce a game, and you say, okay, we're gonna offset all the emissions. You can do that. You can still definitely do that. Do not claim as a result, though, that your product has nil or even a reduced impact. Just keep them separate. You can still talk about the offsets that you use, the carbon credits that you purchase. That's fine, but don't use that in connection with the sale of a product. Offsets are to be used outside of the kind of minimization of harms of a good or service. So those kinds of claims can only be made if they're about, or these kinds of claims, which are kind of implicit in that sort of offsetting sort of work, or offsetting use of offsets. This often gets used, these terms. You can only do that if you have actually looked at and evaluated the entire life cycle of the product and see, okay, there's no emissions across them. So saying it's climate neutral, yeah, just avoid that. Climate CO2 neutral certified, carbon positive, climate net zero, climate compensated, reduced climate impact, limited CO2 footprint. Yeah, you can still use those mechanisms, and they are a good way to channel money to really important activities, but they don't cancel or reduce the impacts that we have by producing games. It's just they have to be two separate issues, yeah, it's not like, yeah, it's just this sort of green arithmetic that we can cause harms on the one hand and then undo them on the other. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So those are the three main ones that I think are the three main greenwashing potential approaches. The enforcement of this can happen through competitors. So maybe another game studio looks at you and says, hey, hang on a minute. We do exactly what they do, but they get to claim that they're green. That's probably unfair competition. You're trying to appeal to more sales or brand benefit, with ambiguous or wishy-washy green claims. That is unfair commercial practice in Europe now. Private citizens can bring it if they're disgruntled. I mean, gamers, we know they love to kick up a stink. Environmental NGOs can also do it. People like Greenpeace or others. And in some countries, consumer protection authorities also will have a mandate to come around and make sure people are following the rules. That's sort of it. So maybe we'll stop the recording there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Ben.